Climbing back upon Mount Soapbox for another rant. And it is Festivus in the US at the recording of this video. If you're a Seinfeld fan, you know what Festivus is all about. If not, well, you can always look it up on YouTube. You know what? I'll put a quick video about Festivus below in the description section, even if you're not a Seinfeld fan. By the way, if you are looking for an amazing sitcom to binge, I highly recommend Seinfeld. One of the best sitcoms of all time. So we have a lot of holidays going on this year, and that's why I always say happy holidays to each and every one of you. And I hope you're spending it with your family, friends, loved ones. But the holiday that I've personally taken a liking to for a quick minute now, thanks to Seinfeld, Frank Costanza, played by the late, great Jerry Stiller, is Festivus for the rest of us. Those of us that, I guess, have problems and issues and like to air grievances to others, whether it's other individuals in our lives, people we work with or work for, or companies in general, or just the world, like our airing of grievances, which is basically what this rant is, an airing of grievances against the gaming industry.
The tradition of Festivus begins with the airing of grievances. I got a lot of problems with you people. Now, you're going to hear about it.
By the way, I would love to hear your airing of grievances against the gaming industry below in the comment section. So this is going to be in no particular order, and I'm not going to spend too much time on each one of these topics. At least I'm going to try not to, because I got a few things I want to go over, and I don't want to be here all day. All right, first off, cinematic trailers. It fooled us at first, gaming industry, with these amazing, beautiful, expensive cinematic trailers. But the final product, most of the time, turned out to be crap and nothing like the cinematic trailer. There's only a few exceptions where the cinematic trailer came close to living up to what we ended up getting. But for the most part, we're no longer falling for it anymore, gaming industry. So could you please stop it with the cinematic trailers? Unless you're committed to making the game actually look like what you're promising us in the cinematic trailers. So knock it off with cinematic trailers. We'd much rather you just save that money and put it towards, I don't know, making the best quality game that you possibly can, that you're trying to sell to us gamers. Next is games rushed out to the holiday market. I think this is very fitting because it is the holiday season, and we've had so many games over the years that have been put out during this time of year that clearly weren't ready. One example I will cite right now is Mafia 3. It launched in 2016 by Hangar 13. It had a lot of problems at launch, and it took a quick minute for the developers at Hangar 13 to get the game playable. It's much better now than it was at launch, but it seriously needed at least 6 months longer in the oven before it was fully cooked. And unfortunately, the publisher, Take-Two, wanted that game out for the holiday sales. And that's a problem that Take-Two has, along with the other studios, not just Take-Two, but EA, and the list goes on and on of all the publishers. They rush these games out for the holiday market in order to try and get as many sales as possible and as many copies sold. And they don't give a shit about whether or not the game is ready for launch. And you would have sold way more copies of Mafia 3. It would have been way more successful if you would have given the developers at Hangar 13 more time to finalize it and polish it and quality of life it until it actually launched way more smoothly than it did back in October 2016. So please stop rushing games out the door. When the games are ready, then launch them. And that's one reason why I appreciate Rockstar, is because they like to take their time when it comes to their games, whether it's GTA 5 or Red Dead Redemption 2, or most recently with how long it's taken them to make Grand Theft Auto 6. When it's ready, it's ready. So even though a lot of us would like nothing more than to be able to play GTA 6 tomorrow, I appreciate the fact that Rockstar still takes their time before they officially release their single-player games. I wish more studios would do that instead of rushing it out for the holidays. But it's not always the developer's fault. Most of the time, it's their publisher's fault because they're the ones pressuring the studios to get these games out, even though they're not fully cooked. My next grievance is with annually released games. including COD. Now, I realize COD has different studios working on different COD games, but it's pretty apparent if we go by most recently the Modern Warfare 3 in name only, that these games need more time in the oven. It harkens back to what we were just talking about, games that are not fully cooked, not finished, rushed out the door. But these annually released games are a serious problem because it's just about trying to make as much money off the players as possible and not even caring about the quality of the product that's being released. So, for example, Activision Blizzard, now under Microsoft, in the past has had a habit of releasing a COD game and then a year later releasing another COD game and pushing a whole bunch of microtransactions through their stores and trying to make as much money as possible while releasing a game that has less and less quality than previous installments. Now, with Black Ops 6, they've done a really good job because they actually allowed the studios to take the time and hammer out the issues with Black Ops 6, especially with the zombies mode, from what I've been told. And for the most part, people love Black Ops 6 because they actually were allowed time to make that game. It wasn't rushed out the door, unlike previous COD games in recent years. The sports games are at the worst, and there was a time when I used to love sports games, going back to NBA Jam, Tecmo Bowl, even some Madden, some college footballs. But I started noticing a pattern, nearly 2 decades ago. Even though I'd be enjoying, say, NCAA football 2007, like within a short amount of time, they'd be rolling out 2008, and I'd be playing it, and I'd be like, this is the exact same game as last year. There are no real differences. And, well, the issues that were in the previous game are apparent in the new game, and it's gotten worse since then. Back then it was okay, it was tolerable. But especially with games like NBA 2K and Madden, for example, they just put out the same game year after year, and every generation they'll do some changes, they'll do some improvements, but it's usually the same freaking game, and they expect you to not only pay $70 for the base version of the game, not including all the different additions you have to buy, but also all the microtransactions on top of that. But then they put out the same game year after year. Now, I realize this isn't 100% the fault of EA or Take-Two. It's the consumers as well. The sports gaming consumers continue to buy these games year after year. They keep buying Madden every single year, and they get mad about it, but they keep buying the damn game. They keep dropping at least $70 or more with each passing year. And if you keep doing that, then the publishers are just going to keep rotating these games in annually instead of every other year, allowing more time to fix the issues that are in the game for the next installment. And in between every 2 years, they just put out a DLC pack that updates the roster of the teams. And Assassin's Creed was really bad about annual games back in the past, so much so that it has been one of the factors that have seriously hurt Ubisoft. Now, they've tried to walk this back by putting more time into their games, but they've also had that other problem we talked about a moment ago, like case in point, Star Wars Outlaws was rushed out the door before it was ready. It had a lot of issues. It still does. And when you rush a game out the door annually or before it's ready, before it's fully cooked, then it's going to have serious problems. And most of the time, it's not going to sell well, unless it's a COD game or a sports game for whatever rhyme or reason. Next is crappy remasters and remakes. Now, there have been some good remasters and remakes. The majority of remasters have not been good. They've been obviously just low effort and just meant to be put out there for nostalgia bait and to sell as many copies as possible. A lot of them do a terrible job with the remasters. I think, the Batman Arkham remasters years ago? They weren't very good. At first, the GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition had a lot of major problems, especially with Vice City and San Andreas Definitive Editions. So much so, I called them the defective editions. But a recent patch actually finally improved a lot of the major issues with all three of those games, especially San Andreas Definitive Edition. So it took a quick minute, but the remasters for GTA Trilogy are actually okay for the most part. And when it comes to remakes, there have been some really good remakes. There have been some that will tweak things here and there, like, for example, Mafia Definitive Edition. But for the most part, I think that Mafia Definitive Edition, with some graphical issues and some other things, is a pretty solid remake. There are things about it that could have been better. I think that it could have used a little bit more time in the oven as well, but it was mostly cooked. And they did make some small changes here or there to characters. They added more to Sarah, which was Tommy Angelo's love interest. And it made sense because in the original version of Mafia, Sarah really didn't have much going for her as a character. So it definitely worked whenever you add more to a character instead of taking away from a character. So I never really had a problem with Sarah and Mafia Definitive Edition compared to how she was in the original version of the game. But there are instances in other remakes where they are not exactly faithful to the original versions of the characters or the story itself. They decide to take certain liberties and make certain changes, whether it's physical changes or creative changes that don't exactly align with what the original game was. And that's a serious problem I have with remakes, is if you're going to do a remake, it should be basically almost 100% faithful, unless you're, once again, just adding to a character that really needed to be fleshed out maybe a little bit more than they originally were. But to completely change a character physically or different like beat of a story because you feel like that beat needs to change for quote-unquote modern audiences, yeah, I have a serious problem with that, and I think most gamers do as well. So next is a pretty long list I want to rush over. Online games, multiplayer games, live service games, whatever you want to call them. A lot of us love online games. I'm driving around in Grand Theft Auto right now, so I've been playing this online game for a quick minute, over a decade, and I play a few other online games. I also play single-player games. But there are definitely a lot of problems with online games that the community of gamers have. And the list includes the ridiculous prices for digital cosmetics and skins. This is very apparent in COD as well as Fortnite recently. They've really jacked up the prices of a lot of the skins in Fortnite. They've added so many different things you can purchase in the game. Even shoes, digital shoes or kicks. Yeah, you can spend money buying shoes for most of the Fortnite skins you buy. I mean, that's insane that you can do that in a video game and get away with it. And there's so many other things that they sell in the Fortnite store now that they're just making as much money as possible off the consumer. I don't have a problem with companies making money, but I do feel like a lot of them have become extremely greedy, especially when it comes to online games. And you see that in the COD store, in the Fortnite store, and plenty of other online stores as well, with how much things cost now, from kicks, digital shoes in Fortnite, to vehicles and skins for characters, and so many games out there. It's just ridiculous how pricey it has gotten. So next is gambling. Now, gambling is a serious problem, and that's I guess a topic for another time. But there is also gambling in some video games, like I guess in previous NBA 2Ks, they had gambling to some degree, and it's a basketball game, it's a sports game. So I don't think that gambling should be allowed in a sports game, especially a game that appeals to younger players. Children or young tweens, teens, should not be anywhere near gambling in an online game. That should be illegal. I thought it was illegal at one point. Online gambling in general is also becoming a serious issue. But moving on from that, yeah, I think that online gambling should not be allowed. Unless it's in a game like GTA where you can only use the in-game currency to gamble. Because we have a casino in GTA Online, but you cannot use real-life money to gamble. And in Red Dead Online, another game I'll talk about in a minute, you can play poker in Red Dead Online, but once again, you can only use the cash in Red Dead Online to play poker. You cannot use gold, which you can purchase through the store. Another issue I have with online gaming is crossplay. For the most part, crossplay is okay, especially when it's just like PlayStation versus Xbox. Well, maybe some Switch games as well. But when you put console players against PC players, it does give, for the most part, PC players an advantage over console players, and unfortunately, there have been instances across the board where PC players do cheat. Now, the majority of PC players probably don't cheat. They play the game fairly, but there are some elements of PC gamers that just make the entire PC gaming community look bad when it comes to online gaming, especially when it comes to crossplay. For example, in Fortnite, I've seen numerous instances of PC gamers intentionally low-resing the graphics so it gives them an advantage over console players. I think that should be a bannable offense in Fortnite. And don't get me started with how many times I've heard about things happening when it comes to mods and cheats and hacks on PC that end up negatively affecting the console players that are going up against the PC players. Plus, there are plenty of online games that give keyboard mouse players an advantage over controller players, with a few exceptions. So that's something I have issues with. I don't have a problem with crossplay, but I do think at the very least companies need to do a better job of making sure that PC players aren't cheating or low-resing their game intentionally, like in Fortnite, as I've already cited, in order to make it fair across the board for PC and console players if they're going to force everyone to play together in crossplay. So that should not be allowed. Time-limited battle passes. So this is an interesting topic that I've had with my fiance Riley. Like, passes are everywhere now. They're in Fortnite. They're in so many games. And it does feel like all too often whenever you start a pass, whether it's in Fortnite, Sea of Thieves, Skull and Bones, the list goes on, that you only have a certain amount of time to grind through these passes because you have other things going on. There's other games you want to play. You're not going to dedicate 100% of your time to one game. And you also have real life obligations, family, friends, and school and work, and some people have children, so you don't exactly have all the time in the world to play one video game and grind through a battle pass within the time allotted. Now, yeah, it does feel like a lot of times the passes are generous in the amount of time that they give you to play through it, like a few months. But I think that one thing that needs to change about battle passes is the whole time limited thing, where if you purchase a battle pass, you should be allowed to complete the main part of the battle pass. I'm not talking about the bonus content, because there is bonus skins and content you can earn in, for example, the Fortnite battle pass. I think that should be only available throughout the season. But for everything else that's part of the main battle pass, like from tier 0 to 100, you should be allowed to complete that whenever you want. Even if the season has ended and it's been months since you last played Fortnite, or any other online game that has a pass system, you should have the opportunity to finish the main part of that pass. So that's something I wish would change. And I think there are a few games like that don't force players to get through a pass within a certain amount of time. So I think that's a good idea going forward when it comes to future passes. Plus, you have the whole fear of missing out, FOMO. That's also another push that forces people just to grind in a video game and put other things aside just to get through a battle pass within a certain amount of time. So I don't like that. I don't like forcing players to do that. I think you should be able to get through the pass at whatever speed you want. Now, some people can get through it in a matter of a week or two. There's others that don't have as much time. So I think that that should eventually change when it comes to forcing time limits on passes. The next is loot boxes. I'm not going to say too much about loot boxes, is because they've become kind of a thing of the past. They used to be a major problem years ago, but not so much these days. So that is a positive change in the gaming industry, is that they've pulled away from loot boxes, because, it is a form of gambling. Next, peer-to-peer. It's time for this to be taken out back and put down once and for all. These types of servers are an ancient relic. They should go extinct like dinosaurs. And the good news is most online games are dedicated servers now, not peer-to-peer. But there are definitely a few games that remain peer-to-peer, like this game, GTA Online, even though it's been around for over a decade, from the 360 PS3 era, PS4, Xbox One, PC, and now PS5, Xbox Series. My hope is that Rockstar will finally embrace dedicated servers with GTA 6 Online, because dedicated servers, for the most part, are better in almost every single way compared to peer-to-peer. Yes, peer-to-peer is cheaper, but it's not safer, it's not secure. Overall, it's just outdated. And it's easier for studios to update and monitor and secure dedicated servers as opposed to peer-to-peer. So yeah, I hope that Rockstar, I know they're only a multi-billion-dollar company. They're only like one of the largest studios in the world. I hope they'll finally give dedicated servers a try when it comes to GTA 6 Online, especially with how many copies of GTA 6 will end up probably selling whenever it hopefully launches in fall 2025. Next is monthly subscriptions. Now, unfortunately, monthly subscriptions have become, I guess you could say, a necessary evil, and that's been done by design from GTA Plus. Eventually, I think more people are going to end up on GTA Plus that play Grand Theft Auto Online, and as it moves on to GTA 6 Online, I see that as becoming eventually inevitable. In the Fortnite crew, it's also become that way because they've made it so encouraging to get the Fortnite crew because they raised the price of the Battle Pass. And with Fortnite crew, you get the Battle Pass, you get all those other passes they have now. They have the Festival Pass, the Lego Pass, the OG Pass, and what's the better deal? Buying the passes separately are the monthly subscription service of the Fortnite crew. So they're basically forcing people to jump on board with the Fortnite crew. So yeah, monthly subscriptions, they suck. I don't like them, but unfortunately, I don't think they're going away anytime soon. It started back with World of Warcraft, I think, or maybe like EverQuest, because those games started off as monthly subscriptions. That's how they were able to support those games in the early days. But yeah, that's just a reality. Doesn't mean I have to like them, but it is what it is. Now, the final issue I have with online live service multiplayer games is when some games are not shut down, but they're not exactly being supported anymore, but they still try to justify some low effort to live service support with some basic quality of life stuff and some new stuff that's not really much to offer, just a few scraps here and there. But they want to make the claim that they're still supporting these online games. Case in point, Red Dead Online. Rockstar's been doing this for the past several years now, ever since the last official update, Blood Money, that came out years ago. But since then, Red Dead Online has basically been a dead game. But they've kept it going because of the online gold bar store. I don't know how many gold bars are being sold in that store. I highly doubt it's that much because most people have moved on from Red Dead Online. But they still claim, they being Rockstar and Take-Two, that they're supporting Red Dead Online with, I guess, monthly events and occasionally like some new maps, some new Call to Arms maps, which is their survival mode, and some new Telegram missions like once a year. But that's about it. And yet they still have the gold bar store open. If you're not going to support a live service game anymore with contents, with updates, with passes, then at the very least you should pull the microtransactions out of the store. They should shut down the gold bar store. But unfortunately, up to this point, years later, after Blood Money, the gold bar store in Red Dead Online is still open. Okay, so there is one more thing I want to mention. This ties into both online games and single player games because there are some studios that love their currencies and like to have all sorts of types of currencies in the game. Like 1 or 2, maybe 3 currencies. I feel like that's enough for a game, single player or online. But some of these studios just go crazy with the different currency types. And there's obviously a few of them that are microtransaction based, like gold bars in Red Dead Online, ancient coins in Sea of Thieves, gold in Skull and Bones, V-Bucks in Fortnite. That's probably the most famous of the microtransaction coins. But yeah, they love their currencies, don't they? They absolutely do. And it's especially bad whenever it's a single player game, when they have microtransaction type currencies. Because I think that everything in a single player game should be locked to the single player game, because you're dropping at least $70 for a AAA game, maybe more depending on what edition you're going to buy. So why are we having to pay additional currency to buy some items, because Ubisoft, once again, is the worst when it comes to this. They've been doing it for years, from like Assassin's Creed to Far Cry. And yeah, they like to have these additional like skins, cosmetics that they'll sell to you, and passes in single player games. I don't think that should be allowed either. So yeah, I think that's ridiculous. But it just shows how greedy a lot of these companies are. And finally, blaming gamers for whenever their piece of shit games fail. Like, they'll spend years and hundreds of millions of dollars on games like Concord, Suicide Squad, and they end up ultimately just not being very well received by the gaming community for whatever rhyme or reason. And these are two of many examples out there. And yet they blame us because we don't want to buy these games, because these games do not appeal to us. Yeah, I had no interest in Concord. My fiance Riley, she played Concord with our friend Bounty. There were some things they liked about it. I feel like the character models were dumb. They should have had better character models. I'm not asking for some anime Rule 34 nonsense, but they were pretty much fugly. And it was a brand new IP, so if it's going to be a brand new IP, the story and the characters and the lore have to be interesting. But most people weren't interested in the characters, the story, or the lore. Yeah, so a lot of money was wasted on Concord by Sony. Suicide Squad, made by Rocksteady, a studio that I used to love from the Batman Arkham games. Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, Arkham Knight, huge Batman fan. Like, they had no business trying to make an online game in the first place. They should have moved on to something else if they didn't want to do Batman anymore. Maybe a Superman game, or a Flash game, or a Green Lantern game, or something else, single player focused, because that was their strength. But then they try to push this online game that the majority of people did not want, that crapped on beloved DC characters like Batman, Superman, Green Lantern, the Flash, and a lot of DC fans didn't exactly appreciate that. So yeah, you do things in your games that fans don't like, including messages, right? Hammering messages or making the game appeal to modern audiences, like the Critical Drinker says, then the majority of the gamers out there are not going to fork over money for your games. We're not going to give you $70 for the base edition or special edition or platinum edition or ultimate edition. We're not going to buy the passes. We're not going to buy the microtransactions in the stores. We're not going to play the fucking games. So it's not our fault that you're wasting money and time and resources on games that we do not want. That's on you, publishers. That's your fault. So accept some responsibility, CEOs and studio heads, for making a product that we did not want. That's your fault. You're the ones to blame for this. Case in point, Saints Row in name only. That is a remake that was horrible. A reboot. Actually, it was a reboot. So yeah, that was something they spent a lot of money on, and it didn't feel like a Saints Row game. The only thing I could say positive about Saints Row in name only was the character design for your character. That's about it. Everything else about the game was bad. It had a terrible launch. It had a lot of issues. The characters sucked. The story sucked. The world sucked. It did not feel like a Saints Row game. So if you're going to make a Saints Row game, you got to look at what Saints Row fans liked about at least the first three Saints Row games. Saints Row 2, Saints Row the Third. I know that one's a little bit more controversial than the other two games, but you have to make the game feel like a Saints Row game. And I think they failed miserably, and that's a big reason why Saints Row bombed and ended up shutting down a studio. So you got to give gamers what they want. You can't just go in there saying, hey, you know what, we're going to make the game we want to make, and you're going to buy the game, and if you're not, you're an ist, you're a phobe, it's your fault that the game did not succeed. No, it's not our fault. We're under no obligation to buy any of these games. It's up to you guys, the studios, to make good quality games that we actually want to purchase and play. So if you could stop forcing the message on us, that would be great. I don't have a problem with some light degrees of messaging, but when you're hitting us over the head with it, yeah, it starts to become extremely annoying, and we want nothing to do with it. I have no problem with anything that's LGBTQ. I just don't think it should be forced on us. As long as it makes sense with the characters and whatever world you're making, because there's all sorts of different types of games out there, that's fine. But if you're not willing to go to countries that are anti-LGBTQ and say, well, you know what? We're not going to sell our game in your country because you are anti-LGBTQ. If you're going to remove that in certain countries, then it's called virtue signaling. You really don't believe in what you're trying to preach. All you really care about is the money. At the end of the day, that's the only thing you care about is the dollar, the money, the pound, the euro, the yuan. Because if you actually cared about what you're messaging us, then the pride flags would stay in Spider-Man games or in COD games in the Middle East and in China and other places that are kind of anti-LGBTQ. It's very hypocritical. And diversity, I have no problem with diversity as long as it's organic and it makes sense and it doesn't feel forced in one way or the other. Because look, video games is one thing that brings people together from all parts of the world, all backgrounds. That's one thing I love about video games is the fun, the escapism, the fact that you can talk to people from different parts of the world, America, like whether it's North America, South America, the Caribbean, Europe, Africa, parts of the Middle East that allow video games, Asia, India, Russia, everywhere in the world. There are gamers that love video games. And that's one thing that a lot of us have in common. And it brings people together. So gaming can bring people together. It can help get us to look past what differences we have and recognize that we're all human beings at the end of the day. I just feel like when it comes to quote unquote the message, that it's just a prime example of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because we were becoming naturally more inclusive, more diverse, more accepting of each other throughout the 80s and 90s and 2000s. That did not need to be like thrust upon us forcefully because it was already happening naturally. Most of us see each other as fellow human beings. That's the way I've always looked at it. Unfortunately, there are some people that are hateful, that are real ists and phobes, but that does not make up the majority of people living in the world. And finally is the price, okay? If you put a video game price at $70, it's not worth $70. Prime example, Skull and Bones. I do like playing Skull and Bones. It is a guilty pleasure of mine. I am surprised it's actually getting year 2 support. I'll probably make a future video about that. But that game is not worth $70, Ubisoft. And there have been so many games that these studios have put out over recent years that don't sell because the price is too damn high. There are games that are worth $70. There are games that are worth considerably less, which is why I waited for Skull and Bones to go on sale. I think it was like $30 when I finally bought it. So yeah, you have to do a better job of deciding how much is this game actually worth. Gauging it with the player base and saying, okay, this game is clearly not a $70 game. We shouldn't be trying to force people to pay $70 because a lot of people are not going to pay $70 for this game. It will have a negative effect on our sales. However, if we lower the price to $50 or $40 or maybe $30 or some games sell for like $20 and you get what you get out of it. Some games are actually surprisingly good quality, especially indie games for like $20. Some not so much. But I don't like the concept of putting a flat $70 price tag on every single AAA game that comes out because a lot of those games are not worth $70. And there's a reason why so many of them end up going on sale a few months later. I think right now Skull and Bones is discounted at, I think, 65% off. Personally, I think that it should be free to play. And that's something I've been mentioning to Skull and Bones official X account for a quick minute now. If they want to bring more people to Skull and Bones, the time has come to make it free to play and to rely on making money off the stores as well as the Smuggler's Pass. Because there's so many other free-to-play games out there already that do quite well when it comes to making profit. But whether or not Skull and Bones can make any of that money back remains to be seen, even if they do go free-to-play and rely specifically on the stores and the Smuggler's Passes going forward. But yeah, publishers and studios, it's time to have a hard look at why games fail, why they don't sell, and one of the many reasons that I mentioned is, at the end of the day, the price tag. If the game is too expensive to the majority of the community, if they feel like the game is not worth $70, then they're not going to pay $70 for the game. They're not going to buy the special edition, the premium edition, or any other editions. They're not going to buy the base edition for $70. The bottom line is most studios and publishers have become extremely greedy when it comes to video games, from the price tag to microtransactions to passes to subscriptions to putting out annual released games that aren't really much different than the previous game that came out a year earlier, especially sports games, and crappy remasters. If publishers and studios want to ensure that they have better sales going forward into the future, you have to consider one thing. The customer is always right. We are the customers. We are the consumers. We are the ones buying the games. Yes, you have to answer to the investors as well, but the investors will stop investing into your companies if your stocks drop. That's just the way it goes. As somebody that does a bit of investing in real life, yeah, if a stock is shit, then why would I buy it? Unless I feel like the stock is going to improve and it's going to end up becoming profitable again. But most investors want a return on their money. The best way to ensure that is to put out good quality products that will strengthen your brand and appeal to gamers so that they continue to support your games, whether they're single player or online, and they keep giving you money, they keep playing your games. And what players want is a good quality product that's fun, that appeals to them no matter what type of game they like to play, whether it's a sports game, FPS, open world, battle royale, the list goes on and on. And listen to your communities. Whenever they have an issue of a game, or there's something in the game that they don't like, or the majority of them don't like or don't want, then don't try to force it on them. In the end, you do not know what's best for us. We're the ones who are paying for your games and battle passes and cosmetics in your stores. If you don't want your stocks to fall, and if you don't want your studios to go under, it's time for more publishers and more developers to start listening to gamers, to the gaming community, and stop listening to so-called gaming journalists or consultant groups.